So the topic, just a minute. So the topic of my today's paper presentation is Human Rights of Migrants, Global Impact of Climate Change. So recently, Tuvalu's president in COP26 gave a speech while standing in the sea, and he reminded us that climate change is real, and coastal cities like Tuvalu and many other such islands might disappear soon. So before proceeding, let me explain what climate migrants are. Climate migrants does not have any defined definition, but as per the International Organization for Migration, it defines climate migrants as person or groups who predominantly for reasons of sudden or progressive change in the environment due to climate change leave their places of residence either temporarily or permanently within national boundaries or across an international border. In 2014, as per Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, it updated assessment on observed changes in climate, their causes, future risks and impacts, and pathways for adaptation and mitigation. This report projected that among a plethora of adverse effects of climate change, there could be an increase in displacement of people. Further, the report warned that the displacement risks will increase for people in developing countries that lack adequate resources to plan their migrations in cases of extreme weather events or long-term climate variability. The Sendai framework also recognized displacement as a major consequence of disaster. Now, the next slide talks about how climate change and human rights are both interrelated. There is a relationship between both if violation of one right can have far-reaching consequences on the other human rights. As per a study, it stated that climate change threatens the enjoyment of wide spectrum of human rights, including rights to life, health, food, water, housing, and self-determination. It could be concluded that states have obligations under human rights law to address climate change, even though the findings on climate change affecting human rights are yet in consideration. So the first human right which is affected due to climate change is right to life. As per Article 6 of ICCPR, it was found that it cannot be interpreted in a restricted way. That is, right to life cannot be interpreted in a very restrictive way. When we speak about this right in consonance with climate change, it has affected vast number of people, which have led to hunger and malnutrition. Also, over 98% are from developing countries. As per UN General Assembly, it stated that the climate change is a possible threat to international peace and problems might occur. There will be an increase in weather-related disasters, which nonetheless are already affecting enjoyment of right to life, particularly in developing world. Right to food is another human right which get affected with the increasing climate change. It is an element of right to adequate standard of living. It is a fundamental to the dignity of human. Climate changes have apparent threats to right to food, and it must be ensured that right to food is taken care of, especially for vulnerable groups. As per Article 2 of UNFCCC, right to food or the availability of food is very important. But climate impacts and its response both threaten the availability and accessibility of food. This threatening happens due to drought or increasing flood among the areas where the food is grown. Then a study by the Stern Review referred that around 30 to 200 million people might be at risk if temperature increases by 2 to 3 degrees. Beyond 3 degrees, more than 250 million might get affected. Climate change is projected to make it more vulnerable. Right to health is the third human right which gets affected. due to climate change. And it is one of the basic determinants as per the assessment of World Health Organization. According to UNFCCC, in its definition of adverse effect of climate change, which has included significant deleterious human health and welfare, and it requires parties to take impacts of health into account while framing relevant policies. Right to educate housing is another human right which get affected. As the migrants shift from one place to another, they are unable to get adequate housing and a proper roof on their head. As the rise in sea level and there is storm in low-lying areas, their houses also get destroyed. As per the International Organization of Migration, people who are most vulnerable to climate change are less likely to migrate. Who are most vulnerable are less likely to migrate. Those unable to move away from negative effects of climate change, whether due to poverty, insecurity, disability, ill health, or other factors, will find their right to adequate housing most acutely threatened. Then the other human rights, other than these four mentioned, are climate change has led to freedom of action and has been a source of disempowerment. For indigenous groups, climate change will impact them badly, affecting a further set of protected rights and interests. Traditional rights of indigenous groups may get hampered. Their right to self-determination, protected by both ICPR and ICESCR, also threatens. Coming to the conclusion, climate change is interdependent on nature, and non-unilateral decision can be and no unilateral decision can be taken by any country to protect environment. Brought both the developing and developed countries to the negotiation table with requirement of cooperation between the countries to minimize the impact. Today, more than ever, the world community is realizing the importance of natural environment, the human life, and sustainable development of our planet. Migration is inevitable, is necessary, and is even desirable if we manage it well and respect human rights, including helping people to prepare for the impact of climate change on their lives. The responsibility of the international community is to acknowledge this phenomena that is already unfolding and to tackle it and confront it rigorously, intelligently, and by using all necessary means. Very clear that when they are displaced, the existing vulnerabilities become exacerbated. Along with recognition, there should also be focus on post-disaster mechanisms, which should not be just ad hoc. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for a very interesting topic, and it is the urgency of the current era. I have a just question, because since this topic is generally speaking about the human rights overall, the global issue, especially when we are going to address the climate change, and recently back to back we have seen United Nations in a past couple of 2 to 3 years, every session of their General Assembly, they are having this climate change in their main agenda. And the most recently 2-3 months ago, they have conducted and organized a very global leaders meeting, and I think somewhere in the UK. So my question is this: means the climate change affected country supposed to be the main issue in your study, so we can more properly understand which countries are more vulnerability to the climate change, and what kind of effects they are looking forward, and how the developed countries going to address this human rights issue.
Right, so your point is that
my data is the data supposed to be the countries which, like, yes, you mentioned generally underdeveloping countries. So we need to understand which underdeveloping countries are more vulnerability to the climate change. Like one way or another way, we are seeing in Pakistan or somewhere Bangladesh or some African countries.
Yes, yes, sir. So your point is valid, but climate change is something which is affecting all the countries. So if we talk about countries which are where the migration is taking place or people are more affected, they are almost all the countries. Like talking about North America, there is vortex. Then speaking of Bangladesh or island countries such as Malaysia, Indonesia, Caribbean or Pacific, there the rise in sea level is threatening them, and people are thinking to migrate because sooner or later these islands might not exist. So your point is correct. I should be more specific talking about the specific countries, but I did a journal study and on the human rights which get affected of these migrants who migrate due to climate change.
Because let's suppose you are speaking about the developed country like America, yes, they are frequently having nowadays these kind of a things. But like I don't like we personally don't think the Americans will be migrate to any third or fourth country. They will be settled down within the country.
Yes.
But the problem is coming to the we see like a Philippine, okay, which is frequently having this issue. They might be migrated to either Australia or they
Yes, sir,
might
yes.
go to the other part of the world. So like, and if you to be more specific in your study, especially if you take in an example or you go for a case studies of at least 2 or 3 countries, that would be more further put weight in your study.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll remember your point. I'll improve this study further.
Thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
I have a question for UTKARSHA, if you allow me, please.
yes, sir, please.
I agree with her talk. Everything is amazing. I believe in global warming. I was an immigrant by myself, not because of the climate change, some other reason. But anyway, I immigrated to the United States. And I have a question for her. What is your message to people like my ex-president, Donald Trump, who doesn't believe in climate change and he says this is just normal? What would you do with that? I think you should include something like that in your study.
Yes, you are right. I should have included, but this is real, and the countries, as I mentioned earlier, are facing climate change, and we cannot deny the fact because they are the people suffering. But presidents such as Donald Trump isn't suffering from it, so I guess that's why he denies that climate change does exist. So, but yes, I will for to improve further, I will remember this point and add it in the study.
I wanted to add. I think there's a just recent movie on this. Don't look up. I think there's one single
Yes, yes,
message to.
it's amazing. I just saw it.
Yeah, so there's a single message to the everyone who are the denial of the climate change, and especially the researchers, scientists like us, like this is she has done a very great research on the human rights migrant and in human rights migrants from the climate change is will be the very serious and a global issue in the upcoming years, but that movie I'm just taking an example. That's a very great message to the all people who are the denial of the climate change, and those who are keep denying there's no climate change, and they will be see the serious consequences in the upcoming future and upcoming years. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for this opportunity.